This is my video about which card game has the best new player experience. Many people wonder what it actually takes to get into a card game. I've heard hundreds of stories of people saying they would love to learn the card game, but they just don't know how to get into it. Maybe you want to become a Magic player after seeing their cool Final Fantasy crossover and falling in love with Magic the Gathering from Final Fantasy. Maybe you've been opening an unhealthy amount of Pokemon trading card game packs and want to actually get into playing the game itself after opening so many cards. Maybe you're a big fan of the Yu-Gi-Oh anime, but you've never actually tried to play the game proper. Or maybe you've just been subject to the massive deluge of marketing put up by all of these multi-million-dollar companies. Well, don't worry, because each of these companies has an easy way for you to get into the card game with nothing else required from you. No longer do you need to actually go outside and talk to a single other human being to learn how to play any major card game on the market. In this video, I'm going to go through and review each of the major card game competitors' online clients and tell you as a new player which one you should be locking into. If you're only interested in one of the card games and want to see if it's for you, you can go down to the description and I've attached timestamps for each of the different card games discussed in this video. But first, I want to show off my E7 Pro desk sent to me by this video's sponsor, FlexiSpot. If you're on the market for a desk right now, FlexiSpot's compact packaging and ease of assembly will make sure that FlexiSpot desk is the perfect desk to handle all of your needs. Thanks to FlexiSpot's simple setup, using the E7 Pro desk makes it super easy for me to adjust the height of my desk to any height that I could possibly want. Thanks to its simple controls, it's super easy to raise or lower your desk for any desire that you may have. Thanks to its large surface area and compact design, FlexiSpot makes sure that you can fit almost anything you could possibly need on the desk at all times. Maybe you're like me and looking for some place to play your card games? Well, FlexiSpot has you absolutely covered with a desk with an absolutely massive range of heights, being perfect for any card game player you may know. It doesn't matter who you're playing with or against. Thanks to FlexiSpot E7's Pro desk, you can easily find some middle ground where you can play your card games against one another. Thanks to FlexiSpot, it's easy for me to lean over the table in disbelief at what my opponent is doing with any different card game that I may play. So if you want your dream setup, look no further than FlexiSpot. You can use my code YTE7P50 to get $50 off an E7 Pro standing desk at flexispot.com. Thank you to FlexiSpot for sponsoring this video. Hearthstone, originally released in 2014, follows an ensemble of characters from the World of Warcraft universe. The tutorial begins with you playing as Jaina, the mage of Hearthstone. Playing through the tutorial as Jaina, they will be slowly introduced to many of the other characters in World of Warcraft, such as Millhouse Manastorm, with a final boss against Illidan. This tutorial serves both the function of introducing you as a new player to the World of Warcraft itself and all the characters therein, but it also serves as a great way to learn the new game, introducing all the mechanics that any Hearthstone player will need to know to play the game. Outside of a few more complicated elements or newer card archetypes which have been added, such as heroes or locations, there is almost nothing the tutorial leaves out and leaves a player starting the game with all the knowledge they will need. After the tutorial, the player will be not so subtly nudged into the solo mode, where they will be introduced to all the other 9 starting classes of Hearthstone. Intelligently, Hearthstone doesn't let you start playing a new class until you have already played against that class in a game, either in the solo mode or in the ranked ladder. This means that if you are playing the game, you will already have an understanding of a class before you play it because you have been forced to play against it at least a single time. This system is also helped by the fact that Hearthstone now has loner decks, which are given to you at the start of your journey as a Hearthstone player. Having these decks not only further informs what each class is supposed to be doing in Hearthstone in the current year, but it also helps to give players an understanding of what classes they would like to play, as they can look at the cards, understand what they do, but also test out each of the different decks to get an understanding of what sort of playstyle they want to play in Hearthstone. Starting out as a new player in Hearthstone, a lot of players generally gravitate towards the mage class as the class they want to play the most, as it is simply the one you are forced to play the most not only during the tutorial, but as you are unlocking the other classes. Because mage is not only one of the more simple classes, but easier to understand, a lot of players will stick with mage for a long time, and having these loner decks to give you a free opportunity to try out different versions of different classes is a great way to get players into the game and learning about the other classes. This, however, is where my praise ends for Hearthstone and starts getting a little bit more muddled in terms of if things are actually good for new players or bad. Thanks to Hearthstone not informing players about the other game modes, it is likely that a new player will simply jump into Standard and not explore the diverse of other options present in Hearthstone's game modes. Game modes such as Battlegrounds or the Arena are very new player friendly modes that cost very little to get into and can be a ton of fun. However, if players do not already know about these modes from somewhere else, it is likely they are to miss them for a long time when starting out the game. There are also many free rewards that have been given out over Hearthstone's lifetime that still sit in places like the shop or the solo modes. However, a new player has no idea that these exist and may simply miss out on a lot of the free value that they can get with their account by not knowing how to get it. In general, I think Hearthstone is pretty generous in giving you many free loaner decks to start out when you start playing the game. However, by hiding a lot of the other free things in Hearthstone from new players can make it feel like a bit of a scam when you actually do learn about the fact that you can get a free Death Knight hero for nothing. Speaking of getting things for free, the shop is also somewhat of a mess in Hearthstone, especially when it is combined with its crafting and pack opening system. As a new player, you are given one of the loaner decks for free to add to your collection after you are out of the new player stage, and you are also given many packs early on thanks to things such as the Battle Pass or simply your quests for starting the game. However, thanks to Hearthstone having many legendaries in the modern sets, combined with 11 different classes that have many different playable decks inside of them, it can lead to many times when you are starting to play Hearthstone, you feel the massive lack of cards in your collection from starting out. This can further lead into issues, as you are a new player and wanting to try out new cards, simply not having access to them will make you feel bad and make you want to craft versions of cards that you do not already have. However, crafting in Hearthstone is extremely expensive as most of the cards only give 1/4 value the actual price of getting another card of that same rarity. This is quite hostile towards new players, as without a solid understanding of what cards you want to keep and what cards you want to disenchant, it is very likely that new players will end up disenchanting cards that they actually want, leading to an overall negative experience. Not to mention, if these players are the type of players who do not want to disenchant a lot of their cards and would rather hold on to their entire collection, they will lead to the only conclusion being to spend more money, which is a thing that you really don't want to feel early on when you're starting a game, that you have to put money in to play the decks that you want to. This further down the road also leads to net decking and a general encouragement of players to only play the best deck in the meta because spending a lot of money to play anything else would not only be suboptimal but also cost a lot on a player's behalf. It is true, however, in most metagames that there are simple decks that are relatively cheap and aggressive, meaning that most players starting out the game will at least have access to something that is powerful and effective in their skill level. It is only when a new player decides that they want to try some other decks, maybe some more complicated strategies, or get into the game at a more deeper level, that the price will start to increase and players will start feeling squeezed because of their collection. Overall, Hearthstone does a pretty good job starting out, introducing players to the game and teaching them the ways to play the game and how to have fun playing Hearthstone. It is only when getting out of that initial learning phase and into the more optimizing phases of playing a card game that Hearthstone struggles a little bit more as the free things given to a new player start to run out. That being said, Hearthstone in general will give you a good bang for your buck, at least for the first few hours of your gameplay, giving you a good understanding of how to play Hearthstone and give you reasons to want to come back for more. Overall, as a new player, I would rank Hearthstone a B. Magic the Gathering Arena, released in 2018, has a tutorial that is much similar to Hearthstone's. It starts you out playing a pretty standard deck of white Magic the Gathering cards against an onslaught of characters that feature all of the other colors of Magic the Gathering. All of this ending with a climactic fight against Nicol Bolas. This tutorial not only does a good job showing the player what all the different colors are capable of and the different things they can expect when playing each of the colors, but it also introduces all the basic mechanics you would need to know to play Magic, such as the different types of mana and the different amounts you will need to pay to play cards such as creatures, instants, and sorceries. After you get through the tutorial as a new player, you are introduced to the color challenges, which allow you to play as a certain color for a number of games until you have a good understanding and will go up against a real opponent. This not only does a good job of informing players of what different colors do and giving you a good understanding by playing with one specific color for a long time, but it also gives you a chance to test out a fair deck against an opponent that will be of equal skill to you. These are all followed up by you unlocking many different 2-color decks, which will give you an understanding of what the different colors that you have already learned can do when combined together. All of this combines together to give a player a great floor to begin learning the game of Magic the Gathering from. Having a core understanding of all the colors and all the things that the different colors represent and do is a great place to get new players interested in the game and learning new mechanics. Thanks to having the Spark rank, not only will new players not be forced to play against extremely experienced players starting out in the lower ranks of the initial player ladder, but you can also get a great understanding of all the different multicolor decks playing against real opponents, meaning that you will not only be testing your skill against people of similar skill levels, but you also will quickly gain an understanding of what your cards do without not being able to play them because the games end too quickly. While this can all seem a bit long, Magic really does a good job giving the new players the tools they need to understand the game when they are first getting into it. Combine this with the many free resources that Magic the Gathering gives out, combined with the new Jumpstart tokens, which are given out to players, which will allow them to enter Jumpstart events where you combine two different types of decks into one, giving you a new experience. Beginning players have a lot to look forward to when jumping into Magic the Gathering Arena. It is here, however, that we run into a similar issue as the one that Hearthstone had. Once you get through that initial new player tutorial and get a good grasp on what the colors do and what kind of decks that you want to be playing, you encounter not only the crafting system, but also the system of all the other game types in Magic. Because of the fact that the new formats are not explained outside of the initial formats, such as Jumpstart or the color challenges, it is easy for a new player to get out of their new player experience and not know which format they should end up playing. This can once again lead to players mostly sticking to the standard format and not having a good time exploring many of the other new player-friendly formats such as Cube or Draft. Despite the fact that Magic the Gathering doesn't ask players to remove any cards from their collection in order to craft more things like Hearthstone, they still have a wildcard mechanic, which also is something that has a very high cost attached. Because of the fact that wildcards, especially wildcards at the gold and mythic levels, are given out relatively sparsely, only made from either opening them in packs or opening a certain number of packs to receive them, it is easy to have a very low amount of wildcards early on in your collecting days. This, included with the fact that using a wildcard is a permanent effect that you cannot undo, means that you will never be able to get any of your wildcard back, meaning that if you build a deck and are planning on using wildcards on it, it is very likely you will not be able to play any other deck for a significant amount of time afterwards. Thanks to this huge cost associated with building a deck in Magic the Gathering, it is very likely that players will grow fearful of using their wildcards and will either be forced to look up the deck they need to build online to have the best chance of having a good time, or they will simply refuse to play with those new cards and will simply stick to the cards that are already present in their collection. However, thanks to Magic having the highest density of both rare and mythic cards, and also needing the highest amount of cards present in a deck being 4, means that you will have a very, very hard time getting enough playable cards to build a good deck in your collection for a very long time, only opening packs given to you by the game. This once again forces new players into the store where they will be encouraged to buy packs, which is something that most players would like to avoid early on in their card game playing adventures. Thankfully, Magic still has cheap decks which are very playable for new players such as Mono Red Aggro, so it'll be easy for players to find something playable at a lower cost point than many other of the multicolored decks. That being said, if you find yourself more interested in slower, more controlling decks or decks that feature lots of colors, it is very likely that you will have to shell over a significant amount of cash early on to be able to play with those cards. And whilst new players may find it hard to build up a large collection of cards, especially for multicolor and more controlling decks, it is true that many of the decks that you are starting out with in Magic the Gathering are playable in the early ranks and will give you a good understanding of those decks, meaning that you will be able to understand what you want to play early on without having to spend a lot of money on getting new cards. Thanks to this, combined with the very friendly new player experience for new players, giving them a good understanding of the colors and what things they want to actually be playing, it means that while it can be possible that you change your mind later and are forced to feel a very high cost as you have run out of wildcards, in general, most players will be able to find something they want to play early on and be able to stick with it for a meaningful amount of time. Overall, I would give Magic the Gathering Arena a B if you're coming in as a new player. Pokemon TCG Live was originally released in February of 2022 and starts off with something new to card games, as a character creator is the first thing you'll see when logging into this game. However, afterwards you are then introduced to the classic tutorial that we've seen in the previous 2 entries. Pokemon's tutorial, however, does less of a job in terms of building up the Pokemon individually and in terms of building up who you are playing against or as, and is more just there to give you a basic understanding of how to play the game. Pokemon does, however, reuse the final boss trope as you playing against the professor for your final match, serving as your final exam of the tutorial. Unlike the previous two tutorials, however, the deck that you play with during the tutorial is not only fully accessible during the tutorial, but will also be present for you to play with after you finish the tutorial, meaning that you will be very familiar with the deck when you are entering the ladder for the first time. Also similar to our previous two entries, there are initial ranks similar to the Spark rank or beginner ranks in Hearthstone, where you will be able to play against opponents of the same skill level before you get into the proper ranked ladder. It is important to note, however, that Pokemon provides players with extremely powerful decks early on. Decks that are very playable, even at the highest ranks of the ladder, are given to a player as soon as they start their new account. And unlike Hearthstone, where the loner decks are taken away with the exception of one, meaning that you will only have one powerful deck to play with on your Hearthstone adventure, or like Match of the Gathering, which gives you a myriad of decks to play with, however, all of them are at a much lower power level, meaning you will not be able to play them into the later stages of your career. Pokemon TCG Live gives you access to many very playable decks that can be played at even the highest ranks on the ladder, meaning that your need to feel that you will have to buy additional cards to make your deck stronger is much, much lower in Pokemon than it is in any of the other card games. This combines well for new players with another quality of life feature present in Pokemon TCG Live, and that is that you cannot spend money on packs in this game at all. Whilst there is a shop in Pokemon and you have a way that you can actually spend money on Pokemon, it is not in the game itself. The shop present in Pokemon TCG Live is only there for you to spend the points that you have accumulated from playing the Battle Pass or from playing the game and winning. If you wanted to spend real life money on packs in Pokemon TCG Live, you would first have to go out and buy a pack in the real world and open it up. This would give you a QR code so you can scan that same pack into Pokemon TCG Live. Because of this, it is much less likely for you to run into an opponent that has a massively outsized collection in comparison to you, because the barrier to entry for building a large collection is much higher outside of players who have played the game for a long time. Usually the players who play the game for a long time will end up in a much higher rank, meaning that you will not be running into them as a new player. All this combined with the fact that you will start with many very powerful decks early on, and you will not be likely to run into many other players who have a massively outsized collection in comparison to you, means that starting your new player journey as Pokemon feels not only like everyone is on the same level, but also feels like you can access many different powerful strategies with very little to no investment into the game. The only blemish, in my opinion, on this otherwise great new player experience is the crafting system present in Pokemon TCG Live. Similarly to Hearthstone, you are given some crafting dust, which you can use to create new cards that are not already present in your collection. However, similarly to Magic the Gathering, the only way to get access to this dust to create new cards is to get an additional over the fourth copy of a card that you already have in your collection. Thanks to this, it becomes relatively difficult without doing special techniques and buying many duplicates of the same card to get a large number of crafting materials into your collection early on in your account's lifetime. All this being said, it would normally be very hard to craft additional decks in Pokemon TCG Live that you wanted to play. However, thanks to the fact that the game gives you 8 extremely powerful decks early on that you can play, it is very unlikely for a new player to feel that they have a large need to craft new cards early on in their lifetime. This means, in spite of Pokemon TCG Live, in my opinion, having a worse crafting system than either Hearthstone or Match the Gathering, it is still better in general because of simply how much is given to a player for free starting off. Overall, as a new player of Pokemon TCG Live, I have never felt the need to really get anything other than what the game already gives me for free, including its Battle Pass and its initial starter decks. I would give Pokemon TCG Live an A. Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, released in January 2022, follows a similar strategy where you are starting off with the basic tutorial at the start of downloading the game. The basic tutorial at the start of the game gives you most of the basic mechanics present in Yu-Gi-Oh! Such as normal summoning, setting, and activating trap cards and spell cards. After you are completed the tutorial, you are given one of 3 different types of decks, which you can start with, focusing on either fusion summoning, synchro summoning, or link summoning. At this point, you are let out into Master Duel proper, where you can either begin by going right to the ranked ladder immediately and getting an understanding of the game from that, or you can enter the solo mode and perform more tutorials against AI bots to get an understanding of different archetypes in the game. It is also notable to state that unlike all of the previous tutorials, you are given an absolutely massive number of gems for completing tutorials, solo modes, or your initial ranked games, meaning that your collection will be very, very well bolstered early on in Yu-Gi-Oh's lifetime. A new player seeing themselves receive this many rewards may be tempted to go into Yu-Gi-Oh's shop and see many of the new player packages that they can purchase in the shop. This, however, is where Yu-Gi-Oh! Goes from being something that is friendly towards new players to something which is almost entirely hostile. Most of the shops I have mentioned in the previous tutorials are something that you generally want to keep your new player away from, as you do not want them to feel like they immediately need to spend money on your free-to-play game when they are starting out. Yu-Gi-Oh! However, takes a different approach in making the shop very, very hard to parse unless you are very familiar with the different things that are present in Yu-Gi-Oh! To buy. The thing that is generally the most tempting for players to spend their gems on right away is the first thing that shows up in the shop, which will generally be whatever the most recent pack in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is. More observing players, however, may scroll down and find themselves looking at the new decks which are present, that you can buy a completely finished deck for you to play in Yu-Gi-Oh! Right away featuring one of its many archetypes. My main issue, however, is that none of these are the actual thing that new players should be spending most of their gems on early on. They are presented first, however, they should be bought later after the initial surge of gems is presented to a new player. Many of the staples, and very cheap staples at that, are present very low down in the shop, almost the last place you could possibly find them as a new player. And these are some of the most essential things, featuring many hand traps and staple cards present in Yu-Gi-Oh! At the time. Despite the fact that these are most clearly the easiest thing for new players to buy, featuring one good card and many packs that they would want to open anyway, it is likely that they are going to end up buying other packs for other different archetypes that they do not know about yet, or a different starter deck for an archetype that they are not familiar with yet. Whilst buying a new starter deck may not seem like a bad thing to other card game players, starting off in Yu-Gi-Oh! With a new deck that you are not familiar with can be extremely difficult, as the Yu-Gi-Oh! Tutorial does not teach you anything about almost any of the archetypes. Despite the solo mode being present and teaching about many of the archetypes, it only teaches you the bare minimum about what the archetype intends to do and does not give you any details about combo lines, hand traps, or different disruption effects that are present in the card game. Thanks to the Master Duel tutorial not teaching players more than the basic mechanics, it is very likely that players will not be familiar with a lot of the very common familiar things that are present in Yu-Gi-Oh! In the modern age, such as large combos and hand traps. Because new players do not have an understanding of the game and how it is played in the modern age, it means that not only will they have a bad experience if they go onto the ladder and do not have any idea what's going on, they will also have a fairly poor experience if they ever enter the shop early on, as the shop is very hard to understand as a new player without experience. All of this combines together to give Yu-Gi-Oh! One of the most prickly new player experiences of any game on the market. If you are a new player to Yu-Gi-Oh!, it is very likely that you will have absolutely no idea what is going on not only in the games, but also in the shop, as there is no effort to explain to you what secret packs are and what they contain until you have already unlocked them and begun doing a bit of research on your own. Overall, I would give the new player experience of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel a D. I would highly recommend playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Only if you are already familiar with the game from a previous experience, or if you are very willing to go through many online tutorials to give you an understanding of not only how to play the game, but how to spend your money in the game in a proper manner. My final thoughts here. Overall, the best way to learn any card game is obviously to have some in-person person tell you how to play the game or give you a good experience learning how to play as a real-life tutorial. That being said, however, it is unrealistic to think that most people will be willing to find someone else who is not only already knowledgeable about the card game that they want to play, but is also willing to teach them through all the new player steps. I think games like Magic the Gathering, Hearthstone, and Pokemon all do an excellent job not only bringing new players into the game by having inviting visuals and by having an easy to learn tutorial, but also do a pretty good job giving players not only an understanding of how to play the game, but an understanding of how the game can be fun for them to play even on their own without anyone else. You may have noticed I left out Yu-Gi-Oh! There, and that is because Yu-Gi-Oh! Is in desperate need of help, and if there is any way for you to learn Yu-Gi-Oh! It is absolutely not through Master Duel. You will need significant help from either YouTube videos or from someone else in the real world to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel in an efficient manner. After the TLDR for this video, I want to know, what game did you play that you had the best new player experience in? I would like to know if you had to learn online, how your experience was there, or if you learned in person with a friend, what your new player experience was when you were starting any of these games. I would especially like to know if you had transferred from a different card game, such as going from Yu-Gi-Oh! To Magic, how the transition was, and how it felt for you learning a new card game for the first time. Also, I wanted to mention that I'm going to be going live from this YouTube channel from the 26th of July all the way up to August 1st. I got a challenge that I'm going to be streaming live on YouTube here for an entire week, so if you want to stop by and see how the challenge is going, I would love to see you there on my stream. Thanks for watching. Let me know down in the comments below. Remember to like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Thanks for watching.